Hello, welcome to our final fat loss cohort momentum call, which is super bittersweet. Definitely exciting to be finishing up a calorie deficit before the holidays. It's a nice time to wrap it up. I know the last even month has been probably a little more challenging than the beginning of the cohort when we started. Definitely for myself, at least, holidays add a lot more stress, a lot more packed into our schedules, and also a lot more gathering for most of us with food. And so navigating that can be challenging. But it has been so much fun to get to see all of you do that and experience it with you myself. So, wanted to wrap up this cohort answering some questions and also kind of talking about like next steps for everyone. So, Sam and I will be going through that. But first, we will start with questions. So, first question we got is where to go from here if I want to take a break from tracking and then get back to it after the new year has settled. So taking a break from tracking. So I would first make sure you are moving up to your maintenance calorie intake. And ideally, you have a couple weeks there to just kind of know what intake is. I would say if you are taking a break from tracking and you haven't gone to maintenance intake yet with tracking your food intake, there is going to be the risk of just kind of like eating everything in sight potentially, which can definitely offset the work you've done over the last 12 weeks. Um, I'm not saying to not do that, but I'm just saying to be aware that that could happen. It's really easy to come out of a calorie deficit and also into the holidays and feel very deprived and just want to like have everything. And that can easily take you from maybe a 1600 to 1800 calorie intake to a 3000 plus calorie intake. And now we're into a calorie surplus. So that's something that I want you to be aware of. It's easier to do than most would think to go from a deficit into a surplus. So what I would recommend right now, if you're wanting to get back into tracking in the new year, you want to take a little break, to start tracking in maintenance, do that for the next week. You have a week until Christmas Eve. So just kind of like moving your calories up to maintenance, tracking there, getting an idea of what that feels like. And then the week of Christmas, maybe just kind of checking in, like whether that's putting your food in roughly for the day to just kind of get an idea of where you're at, or maybe that's just not tracking and using the last week based on like how many meals you have in a day, how that felt for you to kind of go off of as far as like like if every meal you're eating makes you very full and you're just full all day, you're probably in a surplus. If you're eating until you're satisfied, you're having three well-rounded meals that are centered around protein, you're probably somewhere in that maintenance range, hopefully, especially if that's coming from more whole foods. Or you're fine with that. You're fine with being in a surplus for a week. You know that that's going to come with probably maybe a pound to 2 pounds at the most, I would say, of weight gained. But also could also be a few pounds on top of that of just more glycogen in your muscles, more water, from the added carbohydrates and sugar and salt and all of that. And then just knowing you're going to get back to tracking at maintenance in January and it will ease off from there. So I think just having awareness, like what's going on with the scale, what are your goals, what are your intentions for the week, and then whatever it is that you decide, whether that's not tracking at all, or maybe a step above that would be like having some kind of non-negotiable habits that you're paying attention to, or above that would be the non-negotiable habits plus like roughly loosely tracking, just so you have kind of an idea of like a range that you're in, or on top of that just continuing to track, being at maintenance, um, and assessing from there. So I think choosing which level of, I would say, attention you want to put to things over that last week of the year. And there's no right answer there. It really just comes down to what you think is best. And then making sure whatever strategy you use aligns with the expectations. So going from top down, if you are tracking like at maintenance, then knowing okay, you can probably expect the scale to pretty much maintain. Maybe you have some higher carbohydrate meals. That's going to just bring on some more water retention. Those are things you're going to be aware of, but like you're pretty much going to go into the new year maintaining that progress. Um, where maybe loosely tracking, maybe the scale will fluctuate up about 2 to 4 pounds. It'll likely come back down within 1 to 2 weeks of just getting back into tracking at maintenance. And then I would say going next up to having kind of some non-negotiable habits. I think if that's the choice you make, being not so tied to the scale and just really focusing more on how you feel coming into the new year, and then starting to track again from there, and probably that first month of January, like really tuning into how you feel. That's probably the strategy I personally would choose. But that means detaching a little bit from the scale data in those first couple weeks of the year and going off of how can I nourish my body? How can I come back to these habits? How can I get back into kind of a maintenance way of tracking? And then there's the bottom one of just free for all, where there's going to be the expectation needs to be like that maybe you'll see the weight you saw before your fat loss started. That's not going to stay, but also like just being ready for a big jump in the scale initially with a probably a more slow taper off. Anything you would add to that, Sam?
Nope. I mean, I agree with that. Just even just picking a few habits that you want to stick to. Like maybe you just log your protein for your breakfast and your
Yeah.
lunch, and just like not letting go and getting back into, because a lot of people do get into the all or nothing mentality. Like just because you don't track your food doesn't mean it doesn't count, right? We still want to probably include a vegetable at most meals. We still want to stay on top of our water. Like we still want to do those habits. So just kind of reminding yourself, like it doesn't have to be one way or the other. We can do a little bit. And again, just because you're not tracking it doesn't mean it doesn't necessarily count. Like, I mean, when you're probably eating a little bit too much, especially like Michaela said, if you track just for a couple weeks at maintenance, because it might look like a lot of food right now. Maintenance cap, eating at maintenance, if depending on how low you had to go in your deficit, it might feel like a lot of food at first, especially if you are focusing on those whole food sources. So like getting an understanding of what maintenance looks like for you and how to hit that, I think would be a great place to at least start. Um, and then from there, again, just listening to your satiety cues and being intentional somewhat. Obviously, Christmas, it's probably maybe will be a little bit of free for all, but all
That's
the
okay.
other days after that, like just really being in tune with your body, and if you ate, you usually know, like you get to a point where you kind of know, like, yeah, I'm a little overly full there, so dialing it back next. Or again, just maybe you log 1 or 2 meals instead of all three, and just don't log dinner. Like there's lots of different things that you can do to be more flexible, um, without making it like a free for all.
Yeah, and with that same question, on the what are you struggling with, she put staying consistent, bored with tracking food and just want to eat holiday goodies. Seems like I got a hankering for feeling full during Thanksgiving and having sweets since then it's made everything harder. I mean, I totally get this. Like we went from Thanksgiving into like holiday treat season into Christmas. So I think one thing to keep in mind is that likely this past month, like maybe your weight's just maintained. Maybe it hasn't gone down, but more likely, that's not the right. I can't think of the
More
right.
than likely.
More than likely, thank you. I'm like more often than not, and more than likely, we're coming together. More than likely, if this was not an intention right now for you, you would probably have gained a couple of pounds over this past month. And so even maintaining like thinking of it in that way, you're probably net down 2 pounds than you would be otherwise if you didn't have this goal. And so knowing that a little bit of flexibility, like maybe isn't giving you as fast of progress with weight loss, but it's still doing more than it would be otherwise. And so applaud yourself for that. I'm sure you've resisted a lot of treats and maybe you've had some that you weren't planning on having, but you've also said no to more than you would have if you were just kind of free for all, right? So being proud of yourself there. And then also, I think knowing like, okay, I want to eat some holiday goodies. That's totally okay. And for me personally, I want to go into the new year feeling good and energized, but I also want to eat some of my favorite things. Cinnamon rolls being one of them. I have a few things that I really enjoy over Christmas time. And so my plan is to probably just be really intuitive and eat what sounds good, but also try to include some protein and veggies in my day and water and movement. For me, for Christmas Eve and Christmas, because that's what makes me feel best, but also eating a cinnamon roll. And if I want to have another cinnamon roll, I'll think about that. But like I might have another one. I don't make cinnamon rolls every week or every month or even more than like once or twice a year. So those are things that I think are a big part of enjoying the process. And that's what sustainability is. And I think knowing and maybe you want to come back to tracking in the new year, or maybe you don't, and that's okay too. I think getting a the main reason why I would suggest tracking is just so you have a good idea with what your maintenance intake looks and feels like, so that your weight can maintain and be stable there with all the hard work that you've put in, seeing that you've lost like 5 to 7 pounds over this cohort. That's great. And that's also with minimally tracking, it looks like kind of tracking every other day. So I think you could move to maintenance and probably even track a couple days a week and maybe a weekend, or just track your protein and veggies every day so that you like make sure you're doing the things that really have the biggest impact for you, and deciding what that is. So I love that. I think make a plan, decide like maybe which days you're gonna just have whatever you want, knowing probably if it's all 7 days, you're going to feel like garbage, but maybe it's Christmas Eve, Christmas, and the day after Christmas. And then from there, getting back into your norm, or like Sam said, just coming up with some non negotiables. Like, I'm going to have 2 cups of veggies. I'm going to eat protein 3 meals out of the day, and I'm going to get outside and move my body for at least 30 minutes. And that will at least allow for you to kind of come back into checking in with yourself too, and just how am I feeling? What should I adjust for today or tomorrow? So I love that question. And a little bit different than normal, like coming out of a calorie deficit right into Christmas can just be a little bit of a different challenge. So we're here if you have any questions. And
And something else too is like you could put boundaries around things too. So like if you haven't had alcohol in a long time and you know you're gonna want to drink at Christmas. So instead of saying I'm not gonna drink at all because it might not be likely or maybe that's not what you want, can we say a number? Like maybe that's 2 drinks. Well, I don't know, whatever that is for you. Or same thing with like treats, like, you
yeah,
know,
2 treats. And that's what I'm
like,
going to have that day.
yeah, just like pick like a little bit more of a range instead of like boundaries around it, as opposed to like, nope, not having any of it, or like, yeah, I'm gonna eat all of it. Like, let's just find some maybe boundaries around it. So that
I
I
love
found that
that.
to be helpful.
That's actually not something I've really thought about before. I think that's great. Like setting some boundaries. How many treats do I want to have? How many drinks do I want to have? Knowing kind of your limit of what feels really good and you can indulge in the things that you love, and then what sends you over into like the next morning, you feel kind of like garbage. So thinking that through, that's probably going to be different for everyone, right? But I love that. I like that plan. And then you can be intentional and really enjoy the treats you have, because it's easy to like have a cinnamon roll and then maybe have an Andy's mint or whatever it is, have just whatever the neighbors brought over, and then just kind of be grazing all day on treats. And then they really don't taste that good. Um, so yeah, I love that. How do we know whether we should be at the low end of maintenance macros or higher end is what we are looking for, hyphen what our inches/weight are doing, what type of biofeedback, etc. What would you say to kind of start that off, Sam?
I mean, starting on the low end is probably always going to be what most people like to do. I
Mhm.
like to, depending on, I kind of go back to like how hard is it for you if you're like muscle gaining, it's going to be like a new go. How hard is it for you to gain muscle? If you're somebody that has a harder time putting on muscle, maybe you do try to work up to the higher end, or maybe you have a really long history of under eating. Working up to the higher end could really benefit like your metabolic capacity and your ability to put on muscle. Whereas if you've been in a surplus for a while, or you've been at maintenance for a while, excluding this challenge, of course, um, and like you gain muscle fairly easily, like maybe you're cool with staying on the lower end to middle of maintenance. It kind of really just depends on the individual and how you feel, listening to your satiety and your energy levels at the low end. Are you still not feeling the greatest in your workouts? Are you still just, not feeling as good as you probably could feel, like work out, go up a little bit more and kind of play around. I like to play around with it and just see, because again, like if you go to the higher end and it's maybe too much or you're just not feeling great, go back down a little bit. Like there's no saying like just because you're at one place you have to stay there like the whole time in maintenance. Like you can, again, having a range and having boundaries. So like knowing that maybe on the weekends you want to go on the higher end of your maintenance. Maybe during the weekdays you want to go on the lower end of the maintenance, and it averages out to the middle. Like we can kind of play around with that. And again, maintenance is awesome because you can be flexible like this. Like you don't have to hit a certain number. So like knowing your maintenance range could be really helpful. And just different days when maybe your appetite's higher, you had a hard training session, you want to go on that higher end, cool. On other days, you're just busy and you're not really super hungry, maybe we stick to the lower end.
Yeah, I love that. I think too, I think some big things that I like to pay attention to are how are my workouts feeling? How is my sleep and recovery? And how is stress? Like, um, those will all play into if stress is high, then maybe I want to bring food up a little bit. If workout recovery is low and training sessions feel really hard, maybe bring food up a little bit. If sleep is not great, try bringing food up a little bit. If hunger is really high, then I definitely like that's a more obvious one. Probably try bringing food up a little bit. If I'm having a hard time getting in all my meals, then maybe try bringing it down or adjusting with food volume. And then same with kind of on bringing it down, I would say the main ones that I would be paying attention to would be if it's hard to eat all the food, which that almost has never happened to me in my life. That does happen to people, so that would be one. And then another one would be, am I feeling just like kind of fluffy and is maybe the scale's not coming up, but I feel like my
Like
body is
like a
kind of recomping negatively. Um, then that would be a main reason. I'm trying to think another reason why you would want to come down besides really just like body feeling off, or it's hard to get in all the food.
no, those are the main ones. And
Yeah.
again, like knowing like when you do go up to maintenance, if you're already hitting like 3 cups of cooked vegetables or 600 raw, like you're not going to want to add a ton more, like, or you might be feeling overly full. Like we do want to, when we go to maintenance, kind of, we're going to be able to,
Right.
eat more oats or like bigger, like stick to whole foods, but like maybe you're eating more potatoes, bigger serving of rice, bigger, like leaning more in the, or adding in a little bit more olive oil and fats. Like we don't need to increase our vegetables most likely, but they're probably already pretty high if I had to guess for most people. So
Yeah,
really,
veggies and protein should be good. We're adding more like starchy carbohydrates or higher fat, either like foods through maybe nuts, seeds, oils, or just fattier cuts of meat.
yeah, that's what would be my go-to. Fattier cuts of
Me
meats,
too.
add in like more salmon, like those fattier foods that maybe you aren't able to have as much as, because it's just going to be so great as far
Correct.
as, especially in the winter. Like in the winter, it's going to be really beneficial as far as hormone production and being able to absorb all those amazing vitamins and minerals and nutrients that you're eating. That's, fat soluble. We need vitamin D and all of that. Fat carries it. So increasing fats, especially in the form of food and eggs and eating whole eggs again and not a bunch of egg whites, like that's
Well,
usually my go-to.
yeah, and get excited. It's really fun to be thriving. And I'm not gonna lie, we are not thriving in a calorie deficit, and especially at the end of a calorie deficit. Maybe in the beginning, like you're feeling pretty good, but at the end, most people are not thriving. Um, Especially if you are not, I think maybe if you have obesity, like if you have like over 30% body fat or 40% body fat, you might still feel like you're thriving, even, 3 months into a calorie deficit. But I would say most of the people in this cohort are probably starting to feel the stress of the calorie deficit on them, if not physically, mentally. So get excited about embracing maintenance and then also like, um, take time in maintenance and know that that is really going to be a huge value to you to get a feel for maintenance and experience with kind of the lower end, the higher end, what feels good for you, track that data. And then if you want to move into a calorie deficit again, you can absolutely do that. I would probably take at least 2 months, maybe three, at the minimum before you go into another calorie deficit. So probably January, February, in maybe March and see how you feel. Make sure you feel really good before just diving into a next calorie deficit. We are doing our next fat loss cohort in April, so that could be good timing for those of you that are like wanting more continued support and wanting to do another one. Um, and then for those of you that are wanting to just come like really be in maintenance and embrace habits and just be accountable to your habits and feeling your best in the new year, we are launching our New Year's challenge in 10 days. So stay tuned for that. And for those of you that are going to, um, sorry, for those of you that want to take part in our giveaway, we are going to do a giveaway of 3 months of nutrition coaching with a coach on our team. We'll probably kind of talk through your goals and see which coach has availability and which one would be the best fit for you and choose the coach. Um, so we're very excited about the giveaway, and that coaching can start anytime in the next like month, I would say, just by end of January. We'll want you to start. So what we will be doing for that is I will be sending out a form today on on the group, and those of you that fill it out, submit photos to us, before and after photos and a testimonial. We will go through and choose a winner and be announcing that on probably, well, as soon Monday at the latest, I would say. We'll give everybody until Sunday to submit, and then we'll probably announce Monday morning. And you have kind of between now and then to ask any questions if you have them. It's been such a great time working with all of you, and we're so excited for the new year as well. Anything to add, Sam?
No, just remember that just because we're in maintenance doesn't mean like all of our goals are gone. Like now is a great time to
Absolutely.
have a mindset like maybe you want to PR your back squat, maybe you want to have a run time, like whatever. You can have another goal. It doesn't have to be aesthetics related. Um, and also remembering like you can make progress in maintenance. Like you can recomposition. You can still build
Absolutely.
muscle in maintenance. That's the most beautiful place to do it. So just because you're in maintenance doesn't mean like, oh, I'm not doing like no, you are still working, you're still moving that needle, to gaining muscle and to recomping and to having stronger lifts and faster runs and just overall healthier, just being healthy overall.
Yes. So keep us updated. Hopefully, all of you will still be in HF Physique and can share your continued wins. And if you want a future macro consult, you can do that on the website. If you do want to purchase one-on-one coaching, our 10% off sale ended yesterday, but we do have goals calls, me and Sam, this week for people that signed up earlier in the month. So we will keep the code active. It won't be advertised, but we will keep the code active probably until Friday. So if that's something that you want to do, you want more individualization, more one-on-one support, then you can sign up for one-on-one coaching and use the code, which is Black Friday on the website, and get 10% off until Friday. But then it will be cut off then. So, yeah, happy holidays, everyone, and talk to you soon. Look forward to your testimonials, and I hope you all have a great holiday season. Thank you.